Hello and welcome to the third video in our Farm and Forest series. Today we will be creating an outdoor home for those seedlings that you transplanted from seed starting trays into pots last week. So assuming you are starting with a lawn, my advice is to first take a look at what's growing. A lot of times it's much more diverse than grass. Here we have a sample plot we're going to be turning into a garden. As you can see, there's a lot of different shaped leaves. There's even some flowers. Now, if there's one way that humans can take care of something that they don't want around, it's to learn how to use it. So in this small micro plot, let's take a closer look about how we might use some of these plants. Oh, look at this beautiful flower and its leaf. That is called a dandelion. Dandelions, believe it or not, are edible. You can eat the leaves when just before the flowers have come out, or they're a little bitter, so you may want to cook them at this point. But they can be eaten fresh before the flowers pop open. The petals can actually be harvested and turned into a dandelion wine, and the roots can be dug, and they're basically like a mild vegetable that can be roasted. You can also eat the unopened flower buds, like these. And here we have clovers, which is a Butler favorite, the clover sours. And that's the lemony tart seed pods that come out later in the season. And over here, this tiny white flowering plant is called chickweed. And that is also delicious. The leaves and the stems can be eaten in sandwiches or in salads, or they can be folded into dishes like quiche. And so, amazingly enough, in our small plot, we have 3 edibles, and multiple parts of the plants are able to be eaten. So that's something first to take a look at. What's growing and what's edible in my yard? I highly recommend this book right here. It's called Backyard Foraging. It has an amazing number of plants that include all the pictures as well. How to harvest it, what parts to use, and it's really, really fun to head out in your backyard or in the local forest to explore how you can forage. And we may actually make this one of our videos focusing solely on this. But for now, let's get back to our plot. So once we've harvested what we can eat, we've depleted we've lessened that amount of work. But then the next thing we can do is cut the grass really low. So that creates basically a food source for the organisms that are living in the soil to want to work their way up. So if you just try to cut it down or maybe just dig it up, you probably won't be able to eliminate all the grasses and all the plants that are there. So we're going to try to do something called sheet mulching. So the first step is to cut it really low, and you can use a weed whacker to do that if you have one of those handheld machete type, or any kind of hands work too, and you lay out all your greens. The order of sheet mulching, I can show you, is right here. So as you notice, we have the soil surface to start, and then soil amendments. So that would require taking a soil sample, which any major university, Virginia Tech offers soil samples, soil sample testing, and they'll give instructions on how to take a soil sample. And the results of that test will tell you if it's deficient in any nutrients, and it also tell you the pH, so you'll know how you may need to adjust that. Most soils around here are slightly acidic, so the pH does need to be brought up. So there's a variety of soil amendments you can add. We practice all organic gardening here, which basically means that anything that we add to the soil comes from some natural form. It is not synthetic. And so the next layer is going to be your grass clippings, which you're creating 1 to 3 inches, or if you have a source of horse manure, or you can use that as well, which is what we have a lot of here at Butler. And then next you're going to be using newspapers or cardboard. There is a source for cardboard at the local farm and home here in Poolesville, and they have lots of it. It comes in on the crates. Here's an example of what it looks like right here. It's pretty thick and durable. And then the next layer is going to be another high nitrogen layer. So that's going to be 1 inch layer of grass clippings, manure, or kitchen scraps. Here is an example of the kitchen scraps. Basically fruit or vegetable peelings. And then we have up to a foot layer of leaves, straw, hay, or finely shredded branches if you have a chipper shredder, or you can pick them up that have fallen and broken down from the trees. And then 1 to 3 inch layer of compost and 2 inch layer of wood chips. That's your final mulch. This setup will pretty much completely prevent any of your invasives like Bermuda grass from coming up through your garden. And that saves such an incredible amount of time. If this seems excessive, it's kind of putting the work up front and not having to deal with the weed pressure later on down the road, which actually will end up reducing your harvest as well as increasing your weeding time. Here's an example of some straw that you can use for the mulch layer, as well as lots of green clippings for your nitrogen source. And here's a sample of your wood chips. Forgot to mention that you can obtain wood chips from your local tree service company. You can call them and get on a list, and they'll contact you when they have some. All right, so basically I'm gonna go through this whole process, and you can watch me basically sheet mulch our mini micro plot. It's very helpful to have the sheet somewhere handy. I did forget my compost. So that's the second to last layer before your wood chip layer. And the chips have to be pretty deep to cover. So, as you can see here, I'll kind of lift up. Some people call this lasagna gardening because it's kind of like making a lasagna, as you can see. The first layer, we cut down our grasses, or harvested them, our plants, and put down a layer of high nitrogen greens, cut grass clippings or manure. Next, we put down an overlapping layer of cardboard and a very thick layer of mulch. Actually, did you notice, I forgot to mention that I did add the amendments. It was green sand, and that's basically like a micronutrient booster for the soil. And then after the 8-inch layer of straw, another layer of high nitrogen, so that would be kitchen scraps or more green grass clippings. Then your thick 2 to 4 inch layer of compost, and then on top of that, wood chips. Now, the layers need to be thicker than what I showed you, but once that's completed, you possibly can plant into that, maybe 6 to 9 months later. So it's not something that you might want to do for this season, but if you want to do it now and plant fall crops in there like kale or broccoli, that would be a great idea. Hi, here we are finally in the Butler Intermediate Organic Farm garden. Off to my right, you can see a crop of garlic that we planted last October. In maybe a couple weeks, we'll see the seed heads shooting out. They're called garlic scapes, and we can harvest those and eat them, chop them into stir fries as we would garlic. And then by June or July, we'll be able to pull the entire plant and dry them inside, and then harvest the garlic heads. So we've got a great crop of garlic. So what you see directly behind me is a bed that ideally will be ready for your transplants, your potted transplants, or if you want to direct sow, meaning put the seeds directly into the ground, you can do that with, it's recommended that you do that with plants such as beans, corn, squash, cucumber, melon, as well as okra, because they just grow so fast and they don't like to be transplanted. Also, if you want to grow other crops like carrots or radishes, they grow so fast, or they have roots that don't like to be transplanted, that you can direct sow them into a bed like this. But the first step is to first amend the soil. In organic gardening, you're not necessarily feeding the plant, you're feeding the soil. And you're creating an ecosystem within that soil, like a soil web of life. And by doing that, it's creating a really great environment for the plants to thrive. Plants have immune systems too, so they need to be as healthy as they can be. And since they rely on the soil for much of their nutrition, most of their nutrition, then they are going to be able to thrive if you create a good soil habitat. So the first step is to add compost, and basically compost is simply broken down organic matter. Compost can be made from anything that nature makes, whether it be hair or leaves or sticks or manure. And it takes time, and it also takes heat. And so in that heat, there is a sterilization that allows you to be able to use it in your food crop gardens. So after adding compost, I like to use a couple amendments. One is crushed oyster shell. It provides over a long period of time, it raises the pH much slower, more naturally than maybe just a straight lime. And it also creates little tiny microhabitats for the soil microflora to thrive in. Another amendment I like to use is called basalt rock dust, and it's an igneous rock that is crushed from basically hardened magma and lava from volcanoes. And that's filled with so many nutrients that release over time, because it has a lot of silica, it breaks down really quick. So the plants are able to get those nutrients out, and it also has a lot of the trace nutrients that the plants need as well. So those are the two main amendments I use every time, and you can use that in between crops. If you plant a spring crop, you can do this protocol right here, and it'll be ready for your summer or your late fall crop. So this tool right here is called a broad fork. It's pretty obvious why they named it that. It looks like a giant fork, not a torture device. So what it allows you to do is to loosen up the soil structure. So basically create that soft, light, fluffy bed that we refer these to. The reason why we refer to gardens as garden beds, to create that in the soil, but you're not destroying the soil structure. If you were to till, you're taking two wheels and rubbing them like this really fast, you're basically pulverizing. If you can think of a grinder or a blender, it's pulverizing it. When it rains, just like flour hardens into a hard ball, the same thing will happen to your soil. You don't want that. You don't want a hard mass ball. That's not conducive to plant growth. So by loosening and fissuring, as you'll see, the bed, you're allowing the water to infiltrate down, the minerals from the clay to rise to the surface. So you're creating more of an exchange between that top fluffy layer, or that top thinner soil, lighter soil layer, and that deeper hard packed layer. So over time, you will be able to get deeper and deeper with the tines of this. But it's a really fun activity. I highly recommend, if you are going to be gardening year after year, you can get a broad fork. You can get them in all different sizes. So, you know, smaller people can have fun with this. Some of the students we've had two on at a time. But the idea is that you want to wiggle, 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 and get those tines in as deep as possible. And then almost as if you're, you know, pulling on a tug of war, you lean back, and then if you can see these fissures I was talking about, you're not actually trying to turn over the soil. You're just trying to loosen it and pop it up. And then in doing that, you can literally drag it back about 8 inches, 6 to 8 inches, lift up, squatting down, protecting your back, and put it back in. We'll go through a couple rounds. And you see how high the bed is lifting. I like to turn my hands like this to be able to pull easier. Just drag it so you don't ever have to lift this really up high, except for the one time where you're planting it. And there we go. Watch your toes. And you always want to work backward so you're not stepping on the area that you've just broad forked. You can also use a garden fork to create the 30 inches. That's about 20 inches. This is about 8, so it allows you to create a 30-inch bed, which is standard for market gardening or any kind of vegetable gardening. And you can use this. Notice how I'm going all the way down. Sometimes it'll only go down a couple inches. And each year, as you keep adding organic matter and not tilling the soil, but just fissuring it like that, you'll be able to get better and better what they call soil till. Okay. Now, once you've completed those steps, amending the soil and broad forking it, you can then smooth out the surface with what's called a garden rake. You're trying to create a flat, smooth surface, approximately, if you want to do it in a typical standard bed, 30 inches wide. And the reason for making it totally flat is when you water it or when it rains, you don't want puddling, because that could be detrimental. And if it's puddling in one location, it's too dry in the area it's coming off of, the higher parts. So you create a nice level surface. Okay? If you are direct seeding, you can use a small stick like this to create a trough to plant your radishes or your carrots, as we mentioned before. And if you're direct transplanting in, I highly recommend after you plant your plant, pretending that little stick is our plant, that you mulch around it.
You can either use cardboard, a combination of cardboard wood chips or cardboard straw, or just the wood chips. People have said that sometimes they say, oh, there's going to be a lack of nutrition or lack of nutrients because the cardboard is right there, the wood chips are going to be taking the nitrogen out of the soil. That only happens on the very small part, so it doesn't really affect the plant. So there you have it. I hope that was clear. And I don't know about you watching this, but I'm worked up a sweat. So why don't we go cool off in the forest? See you there.